Hello, Liberty University, and welcome. Welcome to the Preach to Reach pastoral study of Pastor Green. I'm Pastor Green. You can say, hey, this was in my heyday, and you can see Dr. Jerry Falwell was also in his heyday. He was one of the, second most popular individual in the world next to the president at that time. So, I was elephant fat happy to graduate from Liberty and get my first bachelor's degree. Anyway, this assignment is based on us reviewing the Larry Hurtado book called The Destroyer of the Gods. So we're going to go to our desk and we're going to try to review that account. I'm probably going to take off the glasses so that there won't be a glare, but bear with me. Now in this assignment, there's basically 5 chapters in this book, but we can't do all 5 chapters, and so the instructions were to select a chapter that spoke out to you, and the one that spoke out to me the most was chapter 5. Chapter 5 addresses the moral expectations of the Greco-Roman world at that time, or I should say the first century culture at that time, and there was a phrase or a term in the piece called infant exposure, which stood for child abandonment, abandoning an unwanted baby or child. That would be better known to us as an abortion. And now another vice that was very popular at the time, it was called pederasty, and that is a sexual relationship between an adult male and an adolescent boy. It just makes me cringe just thinking about it. Now, granted that they probably were not in the street marching with signs saying, hey, infant exposure is wrong. I doubted that they were doing that. But at the same time, they were living such a holy life and such a dedicated life unto God that it convicted the Greco-Roman world, and it convicted them how they were living. So therefore, they thought they were odd and strange and objectionable, just because they were not willing to live and do some of the same things they did. Secondly, their righteous code of living, which is really nothing but sanctification for us, right? But their holy code of living really was a rebuke to the Greco-Roman world also, in the way in which they lived. For instance, a man was considered the head of the household in the Roman cultural world, but the man was also considered the head of the house in the Christian culture too. But what that meant, that headship meant careship. In other words, you were to care for your wife and you were to love her, and that in the marital relationship, you're equal, And but in the Greco-Roman world, as we have studied, we know there was a lot of things that the woman wasn't allowed to do. She wasn't allowed to be seen in public with her man. She had to eat alone sometimes so that she can just pick out the way she wants. She had to, uphold certain standards and things like that. It was just a lot of unfair practices. A couple should be true to one another, but in the Greco-Roman world, if the man wanted to have a concubine or a mistress on the side, it was okay, whereas if the woman did it, it was unacceptable. So it was just a lot of unfair things. But in the Christian circles, there was a high standard for a monogamous relationship, being true not only to God but to your mate, and not provoking your kids. So but they didn't have a high standard for a high view of kids. They put them to work right away, put them into military service right away. They didn't have much of a childhood. Some of the strengths of the book, well, I'm just going to bring out one because we don't have a lot of time. One of the strengths that Hurtado brought out, he was able to reach back into history and bring out a lot of complex historical sources and break it down for the general reader, so that he could grasp what was going on. And one of the weaknesses, which I did not bring out in my paper, but I'll bring out now, some of the scholars thought that he could have focus more on some of the sexual failures in the Christian church. For instance, in 1 Corinthians 5, you have a young man who's sleeping with his stepmother, and that's, totally forbidden. They wasn't even doing that in the pagan world, Paul said. And then we have another situation, even in 1 Corinthians 7. It's not obvious, but it's more implied. What is implied? The sexual twisted ideology of how they thought. You could see it kind of, being played out in Corinthians 7, and that's why Paul is addressing it. Specifically, when it says a husband and wife shall depart for a time, to pray and to dedicate themselves to God. The twisted Corinthian thinking was, well, when that happens, then a man is, if he's getting tempted, he can go out and, have sexual relations with a prostitute or a concubine, and it's okay. But Paul was not saying that. He was saying, separate yourselves for prayer. So a lot of their sexual twisted ideologies was also kind of influenced upon the baby Christians of Corinthians. But some of the scholars were saying if he would have brought out some of those points, it would have even helped his arguments even better. What else? So basically, in summarizing up and making a summary assessment of Hurtado's book, the takeaway for me is that the early Christians were different and they were odd and they were objectionable to the Greco-Roman world because they served the one and true living God. And because they served the one and true living God, they were willing to give their lives for what they believed. And it showed, not just in talk, but in how they lived. And they were willing to die for it. Their citizenship was not here. And so, yeah. And I think that's something we can learn from. We sure know how to talk the talk, but we don't know how to walk the walk. And I am so glad that our professor, Dr. Benjamin Laird, assigned this reading to us, because I have about 3,000 books in my library, but I'm telling you, now it's going to be 3,001. Thank you very much.